Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on POD TV. My name is Sasha Star, and we have today Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. Jonathan, my intuition suggests that you are there.
There I am. Okay, very good. Glad to be here as always. The transporter finally worked.
Thanks. And probably we'll have also Ivan Kucherenko, our man in Kyiv. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Yeah, directly from Kyiv. I'm with you now.
Wow. Well, there was again a bombardment on Kyiv, and we are all aware of that. It's very difficult to comment on this present situation, not only because it's very fluid and it's changing almost every half an hour or so on. If you look at the bigger picture, apparently with the heroic fight of Ukraine, with continuing to supply Ukraine with weapons, which doesn't cost US now anything, it's all Europeans are paying for that, and providing appropriate tariffs or the sanctions against Russia. It's so easy for Trump within the next few months to become the greatest American president who forever won a Cold War, a hot war, or just any war, and Russia became absolutely incapacitated.
It does look nice, doesn't it?
Now, there is a strange infatuation of Trump with Putin, which is difficult to explain, even if you start with the proposition that, okay, he's KGB asset. Okay, it's playable. But even as a KGB asset, how much admiration for Putin the KGB asset can have? He exceeds all parameters of being KGB assets. There is millions of KGB assets around the world, but only one became president of US and exceeds all expectation. Jonathan, please explain.
Well, I think you're misreading the situation, because although he thinks Trump is a KGB asset, actually, the KGB, they have no leverage over Trump. There's nothing they could offer him that he could possibly want. So he's basically independent of that. And it's the same thing. Trump is in a unique position as far as U.S. presidents go, because in a similar way, not identical, but Trump has command of assets that a few other presidents have been able to command. Putin, if you wanted to try to figure out a source for why seemingly Trump might admire Putin, you pointed this out yourself in a previous program, that Putin has absolute command of all assets in Russia. He is technically, we would say, the richest man in the world, because his net worth would be figured in conventional terms potentially in the trillions. So in a sense, Putin has absolute command of assets, but it doesn't really do him that much good, because it does not translate into the currency that he craves most: political power, influence, and the ability to restore the Russian Empire. That is the frustration for Putin. And he, despite his control of a command economy, he is still subject to external market forces, such as the price of oil. Russia depends very much on the price of oil, and that price of oil has been driven down. And sanctions. The sanctions are applying to his partners.
And possibility to refine the oil, to transport the oil as well.
So despite Putin's seeming invulnerability in one sense, he is very vulnerable to the objective forces of market capitalism. How ironic. He has to function in a capitalist economy whether he likes it or not. So now it is a very interesting situation where, Trump has the luxury to, kind of admire Putin for doing the best with what he has, but he is not compelled to do Putin's bidding. And as a matter of fact, because Trump has been visibly frustrated with Putin's refusal to make a deal, shall we say, because lots of New Yorkers all believe that everyone's willing to make a deal. Because Trump's paradigm has been frustrated by Putin's behavior, now President Trump is more than willing to allow his allies and Ukraine to deal with Putin as best they can. And they are doing a very good job of it. Russia's economy is steadily weakening. Their military forces are not able to pursue a successful offensive against Ukraine.
It's interestingly, Jonathan, sorry for interrupting. Interestingly enough, that in the last few days, Russia came up with completely new rhetorics about the war with Ukraine. What they're saying is that apparently Russia has enormous resources, and as we speak, they offering $2 trillion worth of rare earth metals and oil and gas, and just name it, $2 trillion. And because of that incredible richness and fund, they would be able to help Ukraine a great deal, and it's going to completely restore Ukraine and fix it and make the future of Ukraine that there will, all countries around the world, they will admire Ukraine, and it will be the best country in the world. And Russia is capable of doing that under right circumstances.
Yeah. Wait for it. Wait for the other, under the right circumstances.
Yes, exactly.
And all we are asking for is your immortal souls and complete control of your country. No, thank you.
Ivan, what would you say to this Russian proposal?
Remember, children may be watching.
I just want to send Russians the well-known direction where brave Ukrainian soldiers had sent the Russian warship. So they will need those resources. Of course, they will need money they can earn from these resources in order to pay contributions to Ukraine after signing the peace deal. And of course, they will pay for rebuilding Ukraine and all the devastations they brought to Ukraine and the Ukrainians. So, but it will be possible only when Russia will be stopped. It will be possible only when Russia, when peace treaty will be signed on the conditions that will not award Russia, but which will punish Russia and which will make Russia pay. And by the way, I've got a video for today. It's a video speech of one, I think, well-known person for you, Garry Kasparov, on a recent defense forum. So let's just watch this video and listen for what Russian opposition actually is saying about the current situation.
Okay.
Show Putin can hope for. Not a single straight answer. It's not about how many weapons you have, ammunition. It's, are you willing to fight and die? Oh, it's nice. You have a Canadian-led brigade in Latvia. What's the order for this brigade? Will they shoot if Russians cross the border? We know the answer. It will take ages to negotiate. How can we seriously discuss that Ukraine will have to give up fortifications that are saving Europe? We're celebrating NATO's. NATO is not strong. NATO doesn't exist. It's a fake. It's NATO, 4 letters. The reason you are still sitting here and celebrating it, Ukraine is dying every minute. It's a massive sacrifice. If not for Ukraine standing in front of Russia, Russian tanks would be already in Poland. You all suggested that Ukraine would give up. You offered Zelensky a ride. And he said, I don't need red ammunition. 4 years Ukraine is fighting for the whole Europe. NATO was built to fight only one war, not to go to Afghanistan, not to go to Syria, one war to save free Europe from Russian aggression. Ukraine is the only country that is fighting this war, and we're still discussing, should we include them or not? Ukraine is the only country that is fulfilling NATO's destiny. And we owe them everything. Putin, Xi Jinping, all others, they are celebrating it. And by the way, Russia has North Korean, they have Cubans, they have Africans, volunteers. So, and we're still talking about escalation. We have everything, military, political, economic powers on our side, and we're still losing the war. It's thanks to Ukraine, Russia is not fulfilling Putin's dream of restoring a Russian empire. But if, God forbid, Ukraine is forced to make this deal, then very clear, Putin will realize his dream. And then, guys, you are next, but you are not willing to fight.
A very powerful and accurate message with which I am pretty much in complete agreement.
And actually, I've recently read an interesting opinion that we've previously discussed why Putin needs Ukraine, why Russia needs Ukraine. One of the goals is Ukraine as a mobilization resource for Russian army. We have already seen how Russia mobilized Ukrainians on occupied territories and put them strictly on these mid-grider attacks. And in case if Putin will succeed in this war and capture entire Ukraine, the mobilization resource of Russia will be increased significantly. And let's imagine the situation when Putin sends an army of like 10 million of soldiers towards Europe. 9 million of them will die. Definitely, and it will be a huge mid-grinder attack, like it's been in Ukraine. 9 million of them will die, but 1 million will be able to advance and probably capture several European cities, maybe Krakow, maybe Warsaw, maybe Tallinn, Vilnius, or maybe some city in Germany. And what will be then? Will NATO bombard European cities in order to kick off Russians from there, in order to stop Russians from committing their atrocities? You've seen how they are waging this war. What is their it's their way of waging the war. Terroristic way, in order to terrorize the population, in order to terrorize the government of the country, to show that they're like barbarians. They will rape, they will torture, they will rob everything, and to threaten people. So how Europe will act in this way? And this situation is quite possible in the future, in which the deal will be made on the conditions which awards Russia, like we said, in which the deal will be made when President Trump has such advisors as Steven Witkoff, who advise more to Putin, to Ushakov. Actually, I don't know why Steve Witkoff is not being arrested and not being jailed in the United States and not been sent to court, because what he is doing is he's actually a traitor of interests of the United States, which has been led by his own business interests, which he put in front of interests of his country. And but such people are advising President Trump how to make this deal with the Putin to stop this war on the conditions which are favored to Russia, not to Ukraine. It's ridiculous, actually.
A very slippery slope by suggesting that he is acting against the interest of the United States and Trump, because today is very difficult to really hold the line. What is the interest of the United States? What are the interests of Trump? And the situations that exist in US today is unique for the last 250 years. The corruption of this president, his political course, which absolutely destroys the all-American policy for the last 80 years, and which is taking country together with his economic policies and everything else in uncharted waters. And although there are a lot of people who suggest, well, we need more time to implement everything and you will see how America will prosper and grow and so on, the present situation actually completely contradicts this. So this is a unique situation. It will resolve, but when and how, it's hard to say. Probably this midterm election will be the first move towards the resolution of this situation, and then presidential election in 2028, if Trump will not participate in it. Because if he will decide later on to augment the constitution or have a military situation in a country or a war, and several other reasons, either not to hold the election or hold it, but make him eligible for that. So this is really a crisis that we are witnessing right now, unfortunately, in the United States. And Ukraine is falling just a result of this situation. Unfortunately, the manpower, energy, time of Ukrainian leadership are now absorbed by all this endless negotiations. So these negotiations, they will not lead to anything. We all know that. But just the fact that they're being held, they are making Ukraine much weaker. They are, instead of, by the way, after firing Yermak on Saturday, Zelensky came up with a new doctrine of how to fight Russians. What he's saying is, so far, is being a meat grinder, where there is 5 Russians are being liquidated for 1 Ukrainian, but that's not good enough. Okay, that was the point why Ukrainians held so much for places like Pokrovsk, this famous city of Vuhledar, the other one I slipped my mind, but doesn't matter. The idea was to hold on to these points as much as possible, because so many more Russians would be killed, which is true. That's exactly what happened. But again, the Ukrainians were also taking their losses. And what Zelensky now said is that there is no combat fight face-to-face against Russia, no more. It's a barbed wire. It's all the taking the strategic position around the battlefield, so they would be able to, create as much damage to Russians. But the idea is not to fight. Idea is to hold on for 5-10 minutes until drones would come and absolutely destroy everything, whatever Russia has there on this plateau. And if that could be repeated in many other points as well, it's very hard to see how Russia could make even 100 meters advance. It's really hard.
Yeah. And you're making a very good point in that essentially what Ukraine is doing, it's making the the ground war, essentially Russians fighting drones. Yeah, they're not so much Russians fighting Ukrainians, it's Russians fighting robots. And Ukraine can keep building those robots and sending them in and to kill Russians, and all at the same time, all the way, as I mentioned before, the Ukrainians have been steadily reducing the air defenses in Crimea. Now, they're not doing that just for the sake of reducing air defenses. When you reduce air defenses, you are trying to prepare the ground, you are trying to prepare for use of your own air power over Crimea. And the only reason you would use that air power over Crimea is if you are planning to conduct a counteroffensive to retake Crimea. So the mere fact that the Ukrainians have been so successful thus far in reducing Crimean air defenses bodes well for, I would predict, if they were willing to, they're not going to launch a counteroffensive now in the winter. They are going to wait until early spring. And that will be the moment when they have assembled their strategic reserves, which I'm confident they have earmarked for this offensive, and they have succeeded in reducing the air defenses of Crimea and are ready to isolate by cutting off the reinforcement links and resupply links to Crimea, specifically the Kerch Bridge. If they succeed in doing, if you see all those indicators taking place, I predict you will see a successful counteroffensive by Ukraine to retake the Crimea, which will be a decisive operational defeat for Russia. And that, coupled with the ongoing high casualties, all the other factors, which are all by themselves don't look like much, but when you put them all together, it means that the Russian offensive capability will collapse by next spring, and then you'll have that will in turn will have a ripple effect on the political situation, because the U.S. and the European allies will be emboldened by this Ukrainian victory, and so there are still cards that Ukraine can play very well, and Putin is trying to project this appearance of strength of inevitable Russian victory, and it is being shown because now in the current situation we have all these intelligence sources, we have all these means of gathering information about what is really going on that we did not have in previous wars, such as in World War II. And the true extent of German vulnerability and weakness did not become apparent until after we successfully invaded in 1944. Now we have, and by the way, we were still able to be surprised by a German counteroffensive in late 1944. Now it's not quite so possible. So I would contend that despite some, shall we say, pessimistic projections about U.S. resilience or U.S. ability to recover or U.S. ability to sustain economic recovery and military recovery, I would say that those calculations are premature, because it leaves out one significant external factor, that factor being God. And because former German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck said, there is a providence which looks out for children, drunkards, and the United States of America. It's something that has confounded foreign leaders for, shall we say, 250 years. There were many who said that the American Republic could not possibly survive in its first years of existence. They have been proven wrong steadily over past 2.5 centuries. I would confidently predict that as long as the Americans, a significant plurality of Americans, maintain their faith in God, that the United States will continue to frustrate the predictions of those who predict its downfall anytime soon. That is my take on it. But I think in the meantime, Ukraine will benefit from this, because Ukraine is showing great innovation, great skill in using the resources that they have. And I agree with Kasparov that Ukraine is now the bulwark of European security. And it has, in order for Ukraine for Europe to maintain its security, Ukraine must win the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Agreed, Jonathan. And what I would like to mention is that in the last few days I sort of browsed through different sources of information, and very soon I ran into Professor Mearsheimer, who is great.
Mearsheimer. Yeah, okay.
Mearsheimer, he's a great proponent of great powers game, and he explains very clearly why lesser country should not fight a great power country, because by sheer production, the advantages in manpower, in industrial power, and all that stuff, the war is futile and so on. Now, I wanted to ask this esteemed professor, how come is Ukraine is fighting great power for almost 4 years, and it will be 5th year most likely? So either maybe Russia is not a great power country that you're trying to portray to us. Maybe they are not, and that's how Ukraine is able to fight them for almost 4 years, and probably will prevail at the end of the day.
Well, you would actually get some support for that from former Russian President Boris Yeltsin, because in a speech to the Russian Duma in 1994, Yeltsin stated, "The only reason Russia is considered a great power is because its armed forces have nuclear weapons." That statement itself tells you pretty much all you would need to know, that Russia has a claim to great power status, but that claim is very narrowly based. It is based on the fact that it possesses arguably currently the world's largest nuclear arsenal, but not by much. And when you combine the nuclear arsenals of the other major powers that confront it, they are actually larger than Russia's. So right now, it's a very narrowly based. Their economic strength, such as it is also very narrowly based. It's dependent upon their oil and gas exports. And if the price drops and Russia is compelled to expend its resources in a futile and non-productive war, then their weakness and their lack of great power status becomes apparent to all. So now it's a very interesting situation.
But we at least must recognize Boris Yeltsin as a very honest man.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
He was. He was almost painfully honest. Which is a rare exception among Russian leadership, apparently.
Yeah, this present Russian leadership is no wonder that they are so well cooperative with the U.S. leadership. It's just the greatest story of the 21st century so far, of how the mightiest country in the world, leading member of NATO, the icon of capitalism and free will and many other things.
And yet we allow ourselves to be intimidated by a power that puts all of its great power state, puts all of its influence on its possession of nuclear weapons. And we have seen during the course of this war how Putin and the Russian leadership have been brandishing their nuclear weapons arsenal and using the threat of nuclear escalation in an attempt to intimidate the West and to accomplish their foreign policy goals under the cover of their nuclear arsenal. And also, interestingly enough, that is why both the Russian and Chinese leaders stated that President Trump's proposal of building the Golden Dome, which would have specifically as its goal the neutralization of the nuclear arsenals of Russia and China, which could be its only real purpose. That is why they would argue that they would consider that very destabilizing. Oh, it's not destabilizing to their existence, because it just neutralizes their nuclear arsenals. It's destabilizing to their power, to their ability to intimidate. If they don't have an effective nuclear arsenal that can get through, or to any significant degree, the defenses of the West, then their political leverage diminishes greatly. Yeah. So that is why it is still. And in my research and analysis, I have uncovered, and we've mentioned this before, potential flaws in the Golden Dome. There are ways to correct those flaws before they become irreversible. And
John, the major flaw of this project is that there is no money, there is no political will, and it's not going to take place in any shape or form for many years to come. But there is much more serious blow to everybody is. Ivan, how would you comment on the fact that General Zaluzhny just came to Kyiv? What do you think is the balance of power may happen in the near future?
I think that General Zaluzhny is a good candidate on upcoming presidential elections in Ukraine, obviously, but the time of the elections is not clarified, and I don't know reasons why he came to Kyiv. He's an ambassador of Ukraine in Great Britain, and maybe he's on vacation or has some kind of business trip. There may be a lot of different reasons, but of course, General Zaluzhny is an important person for Ukrainian modern history, and he was one who was able to, thanks to the heroism of Ukrainian soldiers, to stop the Russian invasion in the very beginning, and thanks to him and his command, obviously Ukraine sustained during the first month of Russian invasion. But what's next in his career and then his plans, I don't know. The time will show, obviously, how he will like to build his further political or military career, or etc.
Well,
So-
go ahead.
Go ahead.
If he figures in the successful prosecution of the Ukrainian war to leading Ukraine to victory, his political career will be very obvious following the end of the war. He will be in the position of Eisenhower, that Eisenhower eventually got in after he sees the victorious Allied general of World War II, and he'll be in an analogous position to that of Eisenhower. And if he puts himself forward for the presidential election, he will win rather easily, I predict.
Yeah. What's interesting is that right now, as a result of last few days of negotiations, if you want to call it that, all sides admit that there is enormous progress has been made, except at 3 questions that they were not solved yet. All others were solved. Everything was solved. The only 3 questions is the territory, is post-war guarantees, right? And the question of how all that will be implemented, ceasefire, and who is going to be responsible for that, who is going to monitor it. So if they solved all other questions, all that other questions are garbage. There was nothing to discuss. It was nothing. These 3 are the most important questions. Without these 3 questions, all other 758 questions are nothing. Zero.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, they can't get past those irreconcilable sticking points.
But they were obvious even before beginning of the negotiations.
So they're going through basically a ritualistic kabuki dance. Yeah, they're going. It's for show. It's for. They realize they're actually agree. They're only agreeing to disagree, and they're not really resolving anything.
Russia seems to be quite successful in achieving the goals of their so-called special military operation. One of the goals was demilitarizing Ukraine. Before their full-scale invasion, the army of Ukraine was like 400,000 people. They've insisted to limit it to like 600,000, but agreed that Ukrainian army will be 800,000 people. So they are really successful in demilitarizing Ukraine, twice, and other goals. Stopping NATO from expanding on the east, and where we see how quickly Sweden and Finland joined NATO, and NATO accepted them pretty fast. And these were the countries who were neutral for decades, actually, in order to keep the balance between the Russia and the Europe. But now they pretty quickly joined NATO. So it's globally that war is a huge loss for Russia, and they will face the consequences of this war in their economy, demography, and in their political situation. I hope pretty soon.
Those effects, well, not just towards the end of this war, but those effects will continue to reverberate in the years after. For the next, well, probably, if the experience of the World War II and the Cold War are any guide, those reverberations in demography and economic dislocation and those other things that you mentioned, those will reverberate, I predict, for the remainder of the 21st century.
One last question that I'm struggling to understand, and the question is, in the latest configuration, it's Europeans are paying for U.S. Weapons to be delivered to Ukraine. So U.S. is not providing anything like materialistically speaking, financially speaking, to Ukraine. Everything is done and borne by European Union. And what's wrong for Trump or United States of America or Congress or anybody in America to argue against this formula and trying to invent and pursue something else? Jonathan, how do you understand that?
They are trying to balance, the Trump administration is trying to balance a number of competing economic priorities, and the fact that they have not yet formulated a clear and coherent strategic doctrine, a clear and coherent national security strategy, may explain much of this, because much of the Trump administration's actions so far appear to be a series of ad hoc reactions and responding to individual problems as they come up, or individual priorities. So there is no. The problem for them is that they do not have a firm strategy which dictates what the priorities are going to be. This is what we're going to emphasize. This is what we are going to take risks on, or not spend so much resources on, because we will rely on our allies or other things to compensate for that. The lack of a coherent strategy is, well, if you don't have a coherent strategy, any course of action looks okay.
That's true. Well, except that this arrangement that happened with the Europeans paying for weapons in the U.S., just producing and delivering them, that's something new that could not be part of long-term strategy or anything, because that just happened in the last few months. So instead of taking advantage of that and encourage Europeans to buy as much as they ever can, all of a sudden, the United States, they're musing about stopping these shipments and not providing Ukraine with the intelligence and all that stuff. There's no balancing.
That seems to be a lack of internal discipline. And I would say that the Trump administration needs to firmly establish a national security strategy and enforce it, and be able to, rather than trying to let opportunities of the moment dictate what they're going to do. So until they do that, they're going to continue to experience difficulty in balancing and coming up with a coherent strategy that they can reliably carry out for at least the remainder of the Trump administration, and arguably well beyond that. What they need a grand strategy, very much like the containment strategy which dictated U.S. actions during the Cold War and proved to be very successful because both political parties could subscribe to it. It didn't matter whether you had a Democrat or a Republican in the presidency. They adhered to the general principles of the grand strategy of containment. That served as a useful guideline. And arguably, when the United States in World War II, they had something called the Victory Plan, which dictated spending priorities and mobilization priorities. And they were not trying to defeat the Axis with numerical superiority. They were not trying to provide larger combat forces. The United States gave first priority to its naval forces to establish global sea control. They then gave second priority to their air forces to achieve air superiority over the European continent and over Imperial Japan. And they gave really last priority to the U.S. Army. They had a 90 division force that they provided for. And the whole strategic concept was Germany first, defeat them, and then because they were not aware of the atomic bomb at that point, they would then switch those forces after defeating Germany over to the invasion of Japan, which would have been incredibly costly in terms of casualties. But the idea was use the naval and air forces to gain air superiority and naval superiority, and then use the Air Force as a giant sledgehammer to crush anything that got in front of the U.S. Army when they invaded. But there's no plan like that now. There's no strategic doctrine, no national security strategy that is that well constructed. At least I don't see any signs of it. But until there is one, the United States will continue to struggle with prioritizing how best to use its economic and military resources.
Jenton, I think U.S. is by far in much worse position than 30, 40 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Relatively speaking, I would agree with you.
Yes. Now, China has announced that they already assembled 20,000 flotilla for invasion of Taiwan. And they're now making overtures to the United States is that, as you know, Taiwan is a part of China. And therefore, sooner or later, by their own determination or with our help, Taiwan will become the normal part of China, similar to Shanghai or Beijing or anything else. So, U.S. cannot even suggest that we are going to defend Taiwan or something like this because it's not logical. U.S. doesn't have enough strength even to say so, never mind to fight China on that subject. Even Japan, who raised some objections on that, immediately was shut down by China, and the United States was very quiet about it. Quiet. Not to bother the Emperor Xi. And by the way, this agreement about rare earth metals, it's already 3-4 months old. So in about 2 months, U.S. will have to come back to China to renegotiate this deal, because once a year passed by, done. There is no more earth metals deals for China. Now, about Russian or rare earth metals, if there are any, it will take 10 to 15 years of just feasibility study and development and the financial resources, which, by the way, United has none. United has only $38 trillion worth of debt. So Russia has no money either. So all play is to involve Middle Eastern powers like Saudi Arabia, Qatar provide the money, and US will be sitting there and say, okay, this is the top 10% is ours, and the middle 20% is also ours, and we will provide this and that, and so on. This is another cacophony of U.S. so-called Geschäft diplomacy. That's where we are. Unfortunately, that's what's going on. That's what's going. Unfortunately, Ukraine cannot get out of it without disturbing its relationship with Trump. So they have to play along with that. Yes, we are negotiating. Yes, we are going to. You want to come to where? To Florida? Okay. Oh, you now to Turkey? We will come to Turkey. Where else you want us to go? We will come there as well. So they have to play along this bamboozle for some period of time, but it's not going to be for long, because very soon Russia will, who also is playing for time, but they are not as skillful as Ukrainians. So they will sooner or later, one or another idiot like Lavrov or somebody else will say, Russia is standing on its positions. Russia will not change its positions, and so on. So until that happens, so Trump will say, okay, go to hell. Enough is enough. Keep your rare earth metals and all your
We'll find other sources.
$1 trillion wealth and so on. And in the meantime, I think in the long run, and not so long run, I think I would bet my money on Ukraine. Europeans are on the side of Ukraine. And like Churchill, I think, said that United States always will come with the right answer after trying all wrong ones.
Right.
So
Yep.
hopefully that will happen this time as well.
Yeah, we can hopefully count on history repeating itself in a good way this time.
Yes. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me for this program. And we'll hopefully see you all on Friday with great news. I really hope. And in the meantime, Slava Ukraini.
God bless
Glory
you.
to Ukraine. God bless you.
Героям слава. Thank you.
Of course, yes, Heroim Slava. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a great week.
Bye.